Hello, I'm Heidi Olson with UAF eLearning, and today is another episode in our Build a Course series. We have a series of five courses to help you go through the development process. We started out with syllabi and creating and content prioritization. Jennifer talked about creating content and instructional materials last week. This week we're going to be talking about learning activities and interactions with Janine, and then we have two more sessions in the following 2 weeks that will be live and recorded in Google Hangouts. And then we're going to repeat the series in some face-to-face episodes, so be sure to stay tuned. We're trying this experiment of this series of courses to, like I say, help build courses for fall and spring. So today we have Owen Guthrie with us. Hello, Owen.
Hello.
And our presenter, Janine McMahon. And I'll let you take it away.
Thanks so much, Heidi. I'm going to jump and start sharing my slides with everyone and just get going. I have about 50 minutes prepared for you, but feel free to chime in at any time. Let's get these slides going. I'm excited that you asked me to be part of the Build a Course series. In terms of developing learning activities and interaction, I wanted to focus in on interaction more than the learning activities. I do think that both Heidi and Jennifer spoke to building elements into your course, but I will be blending those two things together. I'm an instructional designer here at UAF eLearning, and this is the third section of 5, as Heidi already mentioned. When my slides are up on iTeachU, you'll be able to see links to the first 2, and I'll also have links to these slides and the recording. So when you're building learning activities, I want you to consider not just how you're scaffolding things for your students, but the way that you can, in addition to ramping up their learning and preparing them for their assessments, help them not just interact with the content, but fostering communication between them and other students. So it's going to sound like I'm talking about discussion a lot, but what I'd like to say is the more you can get your students to communicate with each other about the course content, the more they're going to key into the course content, and it's really going to be those building blocks to help them with their memory, getting them further along the road towards really grokking, if you will, really absorbing the content so they're ready for the assessment. I would let people know that it's not so much the tool that matters. I am going to be showing you 3 tools, but what really matters is discussion prompts, asking deeper questions of your students, getting the students to participate. Also active learning, and we do have a iTeachU website on active learning so that you can review that and look at ways that you can encourage active learning. Heidi, I do have to ask because I'm not seeing it. Are you just seeing my slides, or are you seeing the second tab now?
We are following you. We see the iTeachU site, so we're
fantastic. Because I didn't want to start talking about the fact that there's so many things on this site on the left-hand side that would help people think about engaging their students. So I'm not just saying that active learning is important, but that engagement, student engagement. And one of the reasons why I'm pointing that out is because if you get interested in some of what I'm going to show you, you may want to go back and take a little bit of a deeper look at some of the methods that we're suggesting for engaging students, badging, student publication, creating community, gaming, etc. So active learning, student participation, these are the things that matters rather than the tool. getting them to interact with each other and with the content. Recently, Heidi posted to our Google Plus community on a great writing, real-world writing experiment where one faculty person asked their students to go out and create what were actually walking tours of the campus. This is a link here, Real World Writing Project, to that activity. And I think it's a fantastic activity. I've linked here to the actual article, but that professor had students creating walking tours. So some of the tools I'm going to talk about, you don't need those tools. You can just tell your students to use the tools that they have, such as their phone or tablet, whatever, and get them involved with one another. Now, you might think, well, this is a faculty person who has their students going out together, like in the same space. But you could do the same exact activity where your students are online and they're going out, say, to explore their local library. And so the walking tour would be actually a combination of tours of whatever destination that those students choose. So what the faculty person did was have the students go out, create, using Google Maps, a walking tour, but then the faculty person asked those students to rate the other tours, decide which one was best. And this gaming, if you will, got the students participating past the deadline, past the point where they were receiving a grade. They still went in and tweaked and made things just a little richer. They really got connected to this assignment. Now, I'm not sure whether or not this was an activity that was part of a scaffolded activity to get them somewhere else, but I'm going to tell you that by having the students do this in their first year, they were getting to know each other, their cohort, and they were also getting to explore the campus. Both of those things, and maybe you don't think in terms of campus, but you think in terms of resource, explore the resource for your online students. Both of those things create community and deeper learning activities. So here's a few tools if you want to consider some tools. One moment. I'm going to say your mileage may vary. That's YMMV, because while these tools have worked for some faculty, they won't work for everyone. And Peter Wesley taught a class, Salmon and Society, and he used a product called Slack that I'd only seen a little bit just before his class. And there's a couple of links. Here's a link on teaching with Slack. So, and it's an actual write-up on how you might do it. But Peter Wesley used Slack to get his students communicating, but he also had a very strong activity that they were using Slack for. I'm going to go into that more in a moment. Voicethread is also another tool you might use to have your students engage with one another. And WordPress forums. We have 3 examples linked in here of WordPress forums allowing the students to share their knowledge. In some cases, it's about reporting on what they're experiencing, reporting on the content that they have reviewed, read. In other cases, it is about them communicating with one another and getting a deeper understanding. Those are 3 links there. I'm going to start with Slack. And again, there's that link, Getting Started with Slack. If you've never heard of it, it is a web-based interface that will allow groups, lots of groups, to work with one another. It fosters interaction. In fact, it's kind of addictive. It might be a little hard to not interact with this particular tool. And I'm saying that because I can remember hearing Dan say, I gotta go check Slack. You know, what's been going on. So it's a tool. You can use it from your PC, from your Mac. It's a web-based interface, but you can also download the app. And I'm going to suggest that if you're interested, like Peter Wesley, in putting students into an experience, you may want to try out this tool. I'm going to talk to you about how he used it to put students into the roles of a fishery manager, a boat manager, just a sports fisher person. This is my login. I logged in as Alaska Knits, and you can see on the left that you've got your preferences. I am currently logged in here in this picture to the Salmon Society group. There are multiple groups. You could be part of more than one, but you can see here that you could download the Slack app. So you can take this anywhere. Your students, whether they say, I don't have good internet access here or there or anywhere, well, do you have a phone? Because they could probably use their phone for this. It's built with teams in mind. It's easy to manage. It's easy to participate. And Slack emails you weekly summaries. It helps keep you on track, or if you're thinking about your students, it will help your students stay on track. So yes, you, but them. It will inspire them to stay connected. Here you'll see Sunday, January 31st through Saturday, February 6th. What participation? The team had 128 messages. That may not seem like a lot if you're used to having 40 or 50 students in your class, but we didn't really have that many people. And here we had a lot of communication. You can see more seemed to happen on Monday, different types of messages, and you can follow and see the team's stat. When I got this email, the bottom part of it said, you didn't send any messages last week. Yeah, so that even would encourage me as a student to maybe go, oh, I need to do more. So here we had 128 messages, and there were 11 people participating. Well, let's just say 10, because I wasn't participating all that much. So if you're thinking about doing this, you need to get an account and invite colleagues to try it with you. Or you might invite the instructional designers, one or two of us. You're going to have to plan your activity and set up an early activity in the semester to introduce the tool. So we keep that tool overhead, that cognitive load to a minimum. And this way students will have the opportunity to get comfortable with the tool. And then introduce it, lay out your goals and the roles. If you're going to use this, you could use it so many different ways, but if you're going to use it like Peter Wesley did in Salmon and Society, where each student has roles and they're sort of playing a role, you're going to have to detail what those are. And then once you're done with whatever it is you have this activity using Slack for, make sure you have a debrief with the students so that they can discover or uncover what they learned. Here is a slide. I know it's a little hard to see, but that's because I use daisies. I love daisies. I use daisies to block out all of the student names. There are students participating, and this is just one shot of 3 days where Peter used this as a channel of communication for his students to interact with each other. There was a general channel whereby any information about what was going on at the fishery or whether or not a run was open, whether or not you could fish, had been allowed. And then there was channels between students. So students in their different roles could message one another and share information back and forth. So to me, this is a rich environment to get students interacting with the content and with each other.
Janine, I might just add, I can speak a little bit for Peter there before we jump on into Voicethread. After sitting through a couple of his presentations on the topic, You know, it was. I think he thought it was very successful. He used Slack for a couple of weeks. Next semester, he plans on using it for a greater period of time, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, something like that. At the same time, it wasn't 100% successful. I think that's what we would expect in adopting a new tool. There were some lessons learned, particularly due to around the topic of scheduling, when to expect student interaction, when to maybe give them some free time, so you let them off the hook. It has a little bit of an addictive nature, and I think the students felt it was this kind of pressure, all the time to participate, and he was able to think, oh, next time I'm going to schedule things a little differently.
Okay.
Because it does hit you right on your smartphone if someone posts at 5 a.m. on Friday morning and 1 a.m. Saturday morning, you're getting these posts, and the idea of sort of setting some boundaries.
Right. So I see that as a benefit, but I could definitely see how that would just be too much in some settings.
And I liked your point as well about, I think it's important to try it and play with it. That's what we did with Peter, was to load in the different characters, and then a couple of designers interacted with him. And we went through sort of an exercise, a role-playing exercise where he played the teacher and we played the students. And that gave him the opportunity to kind of say, oh, yeah, I see how I can use this. I'll do it this way. So just scaffolding his learning through the process as well as the students, prior to the students. So that's all I'm going to say.
Okay. I appreciate that.
And if I could just chime in here, too, I really appreciate that you suggested using sort of a low-stakes try of whatever the software you're going to use or application early on, just so you kind of, the students have a chance to get familiar with it, and then when it's really important and they have this other cognitive information that they need to be processing, you're not worrying about how to use the application, they're thinking about the content. So I think that's a very good hint and something that we should all do.
Well, thank you, Heidi. And it's really important from the standpoint of getting those bugs out early. In fact, that's kind of a great segue. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about VoiceThread. And I've set up a VoiceThread that anybody who's participating or watches this recorded later, they could log in and check out. You may have already heard of VoiceThread or seen it. I would recommend, potentially, that might be too strong of a word, depending, but I would say if you have your students and it's important to be able to hear their voice, maybe not see them, it doesn't necessarily have to be a video that they create for a product, but you could have them record or respond to prompts using VoiceThread. Please, 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 please don't use VoiceThread to deliver lectures. If you're going to use this product, again, learning activities. You might have your students summarize some content, practice their speaking skills, or you could suggest it to a group of students where they could use it like a whiteboard to record their group interaction. And to get the students working with one another, you're going to need to ask deeper questions. Something that I wanted to do is I just wanted to introduce the tool to my students. I teach as an adjunct, by letting them see and hear some information from me about a project. And then I want to require them to respond to what they're going to do with this particular tool, give me feedback in terms of how they're going to use it. And they can use video. You can see down here at the bottom of this slide, ABC means they can type their response. The phone means, if you're looking where I am at the bottom of the project details slide, the phone means that if a student's having difficulty with either using their mic or using their video, say they've got really low or poor bandwidth, they can use their phone to call in and still participate. They can leave responses. And then, of course, uploading materials. So what I did was I provided a VoiceThread where I took a copy of one of my own materials and I made it public. And that means that anybody who has this link and has an account can interact with it. So you can play with a product. If you want to use VoiceThread, you're going to need to get your own account and then either build your own materials, or step number 2 I have under Design It Yourself, access this public VoiceThread and try responding, try adding comments. I'm going to click on that and it will bring it open for me.
Hello and welcome to the class.
And I'm
We're going to be testing a different product this semester.
So here I am speaking to my students. Video shows them, and they can hear my voice and see me. And then with text, I can also make comments. And my video recording actually stalled, but the sound still came through. Tina, one of the instructional designers.
Hi everyone, my name is Tina.
Got in and made a comment just to show things, how this works. Oh, I see Heidi is in. Fantastic. In fact, Heidi's in right now. And you can see that something is going on with this number 1 over here that you have yet to have listened to or seen. So, what are you doing? Oh! So the new VoiceThread. And what Heidi is referring to is there's been a lot of changes. I took a class, I want to say 3 years ago, where an instructor had used VoiceThread, but it really was just either a recorded voice or some text. And so I think that it's a richer environment now. Again, I'm going to encourage you to test it out, play with it. Let me get back. So play with this interface and then consider what your learning activity might be. When you do try this, if you don't have an account, if you try to interact, either voice, recording, upload materials, then you're going to be prompted by VoiceThread to sign in. And similar to Slack, when someone comments, you get notified. And what I think this would do for you as the professor, you would see your students interacting. You know, certainly inside of inside of Blackboard, you can see when a student has submitted an item. But here inside of your email, you could see how students are interacting or when they're interacting. And for students, if a student were creating a voice thread and using it with a group, they can see what's going on with their other group members. Now, if you don't want to receive emails on a daily basis, you can adjust account preferences so that you don't get pinged that often. Oh, and do you know for Slack, if that was so much sort of in people's faces, I'm sure they could adjust their preferences and maybe get fewer notifications?
Yeah, that's correct. You can turn off notifications. You can, for instance, you can certainly turn off your mobile device notifications, but by default, it tries to keep you as engaged as possible and bring you in. I might mention on VoiceThread, they have made some pretty significant changes, modifications. I'm not a huge fan of VoiceThread, but I think it's good to talk about some of the different tools. I know several faculty who love it. So to each his own, and play with and explore different tools, I think, is a good way to go. And they changed. That's another thing you mentioned, Becky. It used to be very simple text or audio comment only, and now they've added this video component, and the interface is a little bit more, allows for a few more threading options. So
that's right.
Yeah.
I did mention that. The threading options, that's kind of important, because what I also remember from when I used VoiceThread before was here was just this series of responses. Yeah, I agree. And you would get lost in the dittos. But VoiceThread now allows for the students to do messaging back and forth. In a sense, they're just communicating to another one of the students, and to also branch conversations. So you can follow a specific conversation and interact with those students. And so I think that might help it flow a little bit more. Again, it's not a perfect tool for everything, and I would strongly recommend that people don't think, oh, I'm going to lecture with this. But getting students to interact with content and getting students to interact with each other. This may be a tool. Low stakes, and if you've got people that say, I just can't because of my bandwidth, I did like the fact that I could phone in, and I did test that. I phoned in with my mobile device and was able to leave a recording. So I was still participating, even though it wasn't the same richness that video might provide. Okay, so maybe neither of those tools are going to work for you. If you have a lot of your content inside of WordPress, or even if the majority of your content or all of your content is inside of Blackboard, but you'd like to test out a different method for getting students participating with each other, you might look into WordPress forums. We have a few examples of faculty using this, and here they are linked: History of Domesticated Alaskan Ungulates, Salmon in Society, and then my own course that I teach. And I'm going to show you a little bit about what it looks like. And one of the things that I've noticed from this forum versus the Blackboard discussion, the interface to me is just a little bit more inviting. Excuse me. And I can sort of see a little bit more and then dig down a little bit easier. That's my way of looking at it. But I would also say, and this is slightly off topic for our Build a Course series, but this is having your student participate in a public arena. You don't have to have a WordPress site be public. You can have it be private to just your students. However, something that I've noticed is when you have your students discussing in a public arena, you can get deeper consideration from them. You can get more conversation. They're not just creating and speaking to the instructor alone. They are speaking to their peers, and they are speaking to a much larger audience. In the case of Peter's Salmon in Society class, he had outside speakers, professionals in the field, interacting with his course. So these students taking this course could potentially be putting their voice, their ideas, their constructs in front of future employers, possibly. But they're also building their voice online. And I'm going to pull up my own website design class to say that this forum discussion, for me, I had the same questions the previous 3 or 4 semesters inside of Blackboard, and I did not receive anywhere near as much content. You know, research an area, talk to your other students, and give your other students ideas about where they might start with this. So I really saw students, because they were working in the open, perhaps, and maybe because this is just a nice interface, they seemed to participate more and come back to each other and talk to each other back and forth a little bit. Of course, that is, you saw some images uploaded for the Salmon in Society one, so you could link out to YouTube, etc. But it doesn't necessarily have the immediacy that Slack does, nor does it have that visual video quality that Voicethread has. And, by the way, Blackboard itself, you can have your students do videos responding to each other via video. So there's benefits to each of these products. While it wasn't on my list, I did have a list of tools to speak to. that being Slack, Voicethread, and WordPress forums. It wasn't on my list, but I thought I'd point out in terms of learning activities and student interaction, you may want to consider Blackboard's adaptive release. And just for people that are Blackboard lovers, to think you can have branching discussions inside of the discussion board. So if you already like Blackboard's discussion board, but you want it to do some more for you, or you want to ensure perhaps that your students don't go into and use the discussion board with little thought or no thought, that they only are allowed to interact in a discussion once they have completed either an activity or a certain level on a quiz, or they have opened, read, and responded to something, you know, PDFs or reading materials in the class. You can do that as well.
Excuse me, Janine. Did you have a slide on that?
I don't have a slide on that, but I do have a link. Let me open up that link that will show you how you could do it. So Heidi, good question there. What this link is going to do, mainly I don't have a slide on it because I've never done it, but I read through these materials, and what it suggested to me was that you might get richer discussion participation if you only allow students into certain discussion prompts after they've done other things. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. I think it's important to have students obtain some sort of buy-in or investment in the topic, whether it's it's an initial post or a paper or something. You get a lot richer conversations if you can get students invested before they jump in.
There's so many different rules you could set up as adaptive release rules, but one of the things, you know, they've reached this level, or they've made their way through this many of the assignments before they can participate. Sometimes we see students not have turned certain things in, and then they're trying to be part of a discussion where really it's not that they haven't done the work, but they're not at the same level of the other students at that point. So that's just something I wanted to point out to our faculty. You have access to Blackboard, and if you're already you know, enjoying the Blackboard discussion board, you may want to use this tool. I do want to say, though, that VoiceThread now integrates with Blackboard. So that's something you can try, too. I can't report yet on how well because I'm only just testing out that integration myself this summer. As in, through VoiceThread, through Blackboard, you can create an assignment, and then when your students interact with it, a score or the fact that they did it, a column is created in the Grade Center, and then you can set up how you score it in the Grade Center, which I think is nice. But I haven't done it yet. I haven't reached that. So let's talk a little bit. I do have an assessment slide here versus an activity slide, but let's talk about what one or any of those 3 tools or 4 tools, the Blackboard discussion board also being a tool, that could help you engage the students, create learning activities, and foster communication or discussion among the students. These different tools, they're not going to work with everything. You see that I've crossed out like demonstration presentation. Well, you could use VoiceThread to create a demonstration, but there's other tools. Go ahead.
We're not seeing your slides.
Oh, I am so sorry. One second.
Since it's a long list, I thought you might want to share it.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to be on slide 23, I think.
I apologize.
Nice.
You're still seeing me. Oh my goodness. So did you see? Never mind. Okay. Let's see. What else did I? Okay. Did you see the adaptive release page?
I don't think so.
Okay. From this, for the adaptive release discussion, you would follow this link and learn a little bit more about how to set up those rules. But in terms of the different tools that we are talking about, Slack, Voicethread, WordPress forums, and Blackboard's discussion board, they'll work to foster discussion for many things, but not everything. And what I was just talking about was the fact that I've highlighted demonstration presentation and drawn a line through it, because there's other tools that are just going to be better, such as having your student, create a video, upload it on VoiceThread, and share that. But all these other things, scenarios, role-playing, games, having students work on a case study together, the modeling, the simulation, that is, in fact, what Peter did with Salmon and Society. He was having students model what goes on, very real in terms of interaction between different groups, different owners of different processes in our fishing industry, whether it be, the boat captains or the people that are processing the fish or the people that are saying, yes, you can fish, or just the sport fisherman wondering whether or not his plane ticket was, bought in vain. Could you use problem solving to get students to interact with the content? Absolutely. And in fact, that article where the instructor has the students go out and design with Google Maps a campus tour, that's the same type of thing. You could do that same interaction and have your students solve a problem. Self and peer-to-peer evaluation, certainly inside of VoiceThread with the new upload ability, or having students create voice threads that they then share with one another. Other members of their group could comment on whatever the presentation was, using video, using sound, using text. So I'm going to invite anybody who is either watching right now. I don't know if we've got any questions going on. I forgot to mention that, Heidi, that people could ask questions in the Google Hangout on air. But if you're watching this as a recording, I want you to consider what you do that works.
I might just mention, I think on that, and I was going to kind of tack onto that last slide there, it matters so much what the instructor's objectives are. That's something we've been talking about more and more, I think, with some of our presentations, is what your learning objectives are for the course or for a unit. And each of these tools can address different types of interactivity, interaction in different ways, or similarly, the tool, we often say the tool is not what's the core important thing, although it's really good to talk about some different options. Just asking yourself, what do you want your students to do? What would you do in a face-to-face concept if you're making that bridge from face-to-face to online? What would you do in your class? How can we do that online? And if you're not used to doing those things, either in a face-to-face setting or in an online setting, would those things help student learning? Would those types of interaction give students more opportunity to chew on the material and churn in ways that's going to enhance their critical thinking, enhance their understanding? That's what it comes down to, is what sort of understandings do you want them to attain? It's really easy to deliver lectures or content, but if we want those deeper, richer understandings where students start to translate that content into a information that's meaningful to them, or be able to use it effectively in a discussion, we need to see them discuss it or interact with it. And that's why I think these tools are really positive.
And Owen, you make an excellent point there. We, as the faculty person, we as the professor, need to see them have that discussion. sometimes it's difficult to get a sense of whether or not your students are really understanding the content that you're delivering, whether they're working along your goals, your objectives for the course. But if you can see them work with other students, you sometimes can gauge better. That's another way to assess how well they're proceeding. I absolutely agree with you. Heidi?
Yeah, I was just going to add, similar to what you said, how it's really good to have a space where students can be able to verbalize what they're thinking and how the content matters to them and the connections that they're making. And once you're able to verbalize it, you can go back and with other people's comments and thoughts, chances are you're going to go back and say, oh, I didn't really get the gist of it. I need to think about this more. I didn't think about this aspect. And I mean, that's the critical thinking part, where you're taking ownership of saying something and documenting it, and then you're saying, well, is that really the truth? Is it fully explained there? And then getting a chance to go back and revising it and thinking more critically about it with maybe some additional content or assistance from your peers, and then coming out with something that's really solid that you can be proud of. And I think the learning activities is a great place for that to happen, where you're not necessarily receiving the final grade, but you're getting a chance to practice sort of in a safe environment, and before you're actually hitting the send button, the final send button.
That was a good point, Heidi. I agree 100% that the idea of a safe environment. And sometimes we get questions from faculty that I teach or in general faculty developing new courses saying, well, I'm really worried about my students cheating in an online context, or what if they get someone to help them with their quizzes or their tests or whatever. And if you're using these rich learning activities, these highly interactive learning activities, there's really no way you can cheat, because the demonstration of their understanding is so sort of ongoing and thorough, and there's revision. No one's going to do that for their friend. It's just the investment, the involvement, it's too rich. And so that's exactly what we want as instructors, is that sort of rich, deep, persistent involvement.
And I want to point out, even though my slide here says assessment types, I'm talking about learning activities with these different tools, and something that I also think is very important is that concept of revision. So as a student learns, because Heidi, you did mention, that they might realize, oh, I wasn't getting the point, and go back and take a second look. So you could, any of these activities, you could do a smaller activity earlier on in your course, and then either ask them to revise it, share it out differently, share it out again, or completely just repackage the product once they've gone through the whole cycle of the activity, and then how could they do it better. And that's actually something that also came up from that article that you shared, Heidi, on the campus walking tours. What could the next semester's students do? What other walking tours might be important or valuable? So that particular activity kept going all semester long. And it's that kind of activity or assignment, building up towards either bigger assessments or creating a thread through the class, that I think is really valuable if we can find something like that. And I have this slide. There's way too many words on it, but I would invite you, much in the way that Owen just mentioned about cheating, or this concept of concern for what our students are or are not doing. If we ask them deeper questions, if we give them things that are meatier to work with, we will both get a better understanding of what it is that they are learning, and we will definitely reduce the possibility of their interacting inappropriately with the content. Now, there is an open lab from 1 to 3 today, but I don't believe that we have anyone necessarily that has questions right now today on these topics, but I would suggest that if you have any questions on any of these topics, you could follow some of the links that are in these slides, but also contact us at UAF eLearning and ask us questions about engagement and learning activities that are designed to get students communicating with one another, that are designed to get at the deeper topic that you have set out, your big ideas, or the overarching series of activities that you want your students to go through in order to best learn the content that you've laid out for them. We'd be really happy to help you, not just through this Build a Course series, of which this is the 3rd installment. There are 2 more to come. I need to pull up my slides, Heidi, to say what those next 2 are. But we are here. We're here to help. What are those next 2 ones?
I got them for you. The next one happens to be me on June 29th. I'll be talking about effective measurement and assessment. And then on July 6th, we're going to be talking about functioning course technology and tools.
Excellent, excellent. And I do have that in the slides as well.
Yeah, that's on slide 4.
Yeah. Good. Are there any other questions or comments before we wrap up this particular session?
See, I see there is one in the Q&A stream from a participant.
Okay.
It says, would this work with a large group of students as well? It seems very involved with the instructor. I'm not sure when this question came in. I missed its arrival.
Okay. Any of these tools could work either in a small group setting where you have the students working with one another. And I mentioned that concept of maybe using Voicethread like a whiteboard where your students are doing group project work. So a huge class, 60 students, 70, 100 students, one of those lecture-style classes, whether it be online or face-to-face, these tools are something you could put smaller groups into to foster community and discussion, deeper discussion. But you could also, this concept, oh wait, as the instructor, I'm going to be overwhelmed with what's going on here. You could roll out any of these products where it's the student using it, or with smaller learning activities, say something that just goes on for a week or 2 weeks or one of your modules. You can make it less time intensive, let's say. I am positive with Slack, even though Slack has the ability of being a little bit addictive, that you could use Slack to have a discussion about a book your students are working through or a chapter. You could use Slack, in my case, for website design. I could have a Slack channel set up where my students talk to each other about some great FTP tools that they've come across. And that's not something that I need to write herd on, if you will, but it would help them maybe assist each other. VoiceThread, again, I mentioned you could do that with small groups. In fact, you could put students into groups.
Some of those standard classroom management techniques that instructors have been using for a long time might work too, just by breaking students down into groups for group discussion, where you're acting more of the moderator, occasionally dropping in to see what's going on in a given group. If you do have a cohort of 50 students, it's a pretty daunting task to moderate a discussion of that size. In fact, I think most members of the design team would really suggest breaking that down into groups of 8 to 12 students, 7 to 12, something like that.
Need enough
discussions.
Somebody falls off the radar, that you still have good discussion, but not too many that there's not valuable discussion. Also, with adaptive release inside of the discussion boards, part of what I was reading there, you can, as the instructor, put specific people in. So if you haven't used groups inside of Blackboard, you could still use adaptive release in the discussion board to set up discussions for different groups or for different levels of your students. So yeah, great question. Good.
I agree that that's a good question. This group, every cohort is different, and I think in how you address that as an instructor, the types of questions you're chewing on with your students or asking them to work with, every course is different, and the scope of those questions and the time frames, everything's to do it well. It generally involves some custom tailoring.
And again, with any of these tools, test them out in advance, and you can ask for our assistance, just playing around with them a little bit. You can ask your students for some assistance playing around with them early in the semester, because that could be fun. Like, use one of the tools to get their feedback on how well the content is coming across in that module. And they wouldn't necessarily need to know that you're then going to use that particular tool 2 modules later for something else. Okay. I know, tricky, but that's it. That's all I have to share for this third section of Building a Course series. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Owen.
You bet. It's been a pleasure.